June 17, 1944. 0600 hours. On the island of Saipan, Lieutenant Colonel Takashi Harakushi of Japan's 43rd Infantry Division crouched inside his command bunker. From the shadows, he studied the distant American beachhead through his field glasses. And then, death struck without warning. A single crack shattered the morning air. Captain Yamada, standing just 3 feet away, dropped lifeless to the floor. A perfect hole through his forehead. Blood splattered across the coral walls. But there was no muzzle flash, no smoke, no movement. The Americans were 800 yards away, far beyond what Japanese doctrine believed possible for precision fire. Harakushi pressed himself against the cold coral, bewildered. How could they strike from nowhere? The answer lay over 1,100 yards away. Hidden on a ridge, U.S. Marine Scout Sniper Corporal Daniel Maddox calmly worked the bolt of his M1903A1 rifle. At his side, a spotter whispered, "Confirmed kill." The myth of Japanese superiority. Before the Pacific War, the Japanese Army had supreme faith in their snipers. Trained at the Toyama Infantry School, they learned patience, concealment, and marksmanship at ranges of 300 to 500 meters. Their Type 97 rifles, fitted with 2.5x scopes, were considered the pinnacle of long-range shooting. But 500 meters was nothing to the Marines. What Japan never understood was that American snipers came from a culture obsessed with marksmanship. Decades of competition shooting at Camp Perry's 1,000-yard ranges had produced men who could hit targets smaller than a helmet from distances the Japanese thought impossible. The American advantage, the weapon of choice, the M1903A1 Springfield, modified for sniping. Star-gauged barrels for extreme accuracy. Match-grade triggers tuned to perfection. Fitted with the revolutionary Unertl 8x scope, with external windage and elevation knobs that allowed precise adjustments for bullet drop, wind drift, even the Earth's rotation. For Marines trained to exploit these tools, hitting a target at 900 to 1,200 yards was not fantasy. It was routine. Death from nowhere. In Guadalcanal, Japanese officers learned this the hard way. One diary from a soldier of the 2nd Sendai Division recorded the horror. The lieutenant was speaking to us, and then his head snapped back. A red mist hung in the air. We heard the rifle shot 2 seconds later. Death had come from nowhere. Panic spread through the ranks. Soldiers ducked into the jungle, terrified. They could not see the enemy. They could not fight back, because the enemy was too far away to even imagine. A tactical nightmare. At Bloody Ridge, September 1942, Marine snipers eliminated 17 Japanese officers in just 3 days. Gunnery Sergeant Mitchell Barnes even used the glint of samurai swords as aiming points, dropping leaders from nearly 1,000 yards. Soon, Japanese officers stripped insignia from their uniforms, desperate to blend in with common soldiers. Yet, even that could not save them. The psychological war. Survivors described the fear as supernatural. Lieutenant Commander Ishikawa of the Special Naval Landing Forces wrote in his memoir, "The Americans had demon eyes. They could see through the jungle. Our men believed they used invisible projectiles because no rifle could kill from such distances. Japanese soldiers crawled on their bellies for hundreds of meters, too terrified to stand upright. Leadership crumbled. Entire assaults stalled, not from machine guns or artillery, but from the terror of unseen snipers." Saipan's ghosts. On Saipan, survivors whispered about ghost shooters. Captain Sakai Oba recorded in his journal, "The tanks, the flamethrowers, even the artillery we could endure. But the ghost shooters, the men feared them more than anything." Snipers like Corporal Robert Holmes studied the winds, the shimmer of heat rising from coral, even the humidity in the air. From over 1,000 yards, they struck with terrifying precision. To Japanese soldiers, it seemed like a death ray, but it was simply science, skill, and patience. The final realization. Colonel Tadashi Suzuki of the 31st Army refused to believe the reports. "No man can kill at 800 meters, he insisted, until he saw a fellow officer collapse from a shot nearly 900 yards away. Only after capturing an American sniper rifle did he understand. Holding the Springfield with its Unertl scope, he finally realized this was not magic. This was technology and training his own army had ignored. Legacy of the ghost shooters. From Guadalcanal to Okinawa, Marine snipers changed the Pacific battlefield. They shattered Japanese confidence, decapitated leadership, and turned every open ridge or bunker into a death trap. The Japanese entered the war believing spiritual strength could overcome technology. But on the ridges of Saipan, they learned the harsh truth. Against the ghost shooters of the Marines, belief alone could not save them. With every passing day, the horror deepened. Japanese commanders on Saipan began to realize no position on the island was safe. Every ridge, every bunker, every supply trail lay within the reach of Marine Scout snipers. This was not just a new weapon, it was a revolution in warfare. Among the deadliest was the legendary unit known as the 40 Thieves of Saipan, led by Lieutenant Frank Tuchovsky. Armed with M1903A1 rifles topped with Unertl 8x scopes, his men turned the battlefield into a nightmare. They weren't simply killing, they were waging psychological war. Officers no longer dared to gather in daylight. Supplies could not move above ground. Orders had to be whispered in bunkers. Entire formations were paralyzed by the simple knowledge that a single step into the open might bring instant, unseen death. Breaking the spirit of the samurai. In a letter never sent home, Lieutenant Hiroshi Kobayashi of the 136th Infantry Regiment admitted what many Japanese soldiers feared to confess. The Americans have stolen honor from the warrior. They kill from distances where no samurai can answer. Combat is no longer spirit against spirit. It is numbers, mathematics, and glass lenses. For men raised to believe war was a test of courage and spirit, the cold precision of Marine snipers was shattering. The science of death. Every component of the American sniper system had been perfected for extreme accuracy. Japanese ordnance officers, after capturing a few rifles, were stunned. Match-grade ammunition loaded with Sierra boat-tail bullets that stayed stable at over 1,000 yards. Brass cases hand-selected for perfect chamber pressure. Powder charges measured to 1/10 of a grain. Where the Japanese saw rifles as weapons of honor, the Marines treated them as instruments of science. To their enemies, it felt like sorcery, the imbalance of power. Even when Japan finally understood the threat, it was too late. Their Type 97 rifles with 2.5x scopes were obsolete against the Unertl-equipped Springfields. Japanese snipers could barely identify a target at 400 meters, while Marines were eliminating officers from 3 times that distance. One Japanese sniper, Master Sergeant Tetsuo Harada, later admitted, "Fighting them was like facing matchlock muskets against modern rifles. We could do nothing. We waited for them to come close. But they never needed to." The hand of death. At Tarawa, within the first 24 hours, Marine snipers decapitated the Japanese command structure. Admiral Shibasaki himself and nearly his entire staff were shot down as they tried to move between positions. Coordination collapsed. Survivors spoke of the hand of death plucking leaders away, one by one. And even disguises didn't work. Japanese officers tore off insignia, wore enlisted uniforms, even hid among common soldiers, yet they still died first. They never understood that Marine snipers didn't need badges of rank. Through an 8x scope, body language alone revealed who was in charge. Evolution of a killer art. By the Battle of Peleliu in late 1944, Marine snipers had become surgical. They threaded bullets through firing slits, air vents, even gaps between coral boulders. Bunkers that Japanese troops believed invulnerable suddenly became death traps. A single shot could silence a machine gun nest. Another would pick off an artillery observer before he spoke into his radio. Japanese soldiers were forced underground for entire days, blind, deaf, and paralyzed, while Marines advanced above. A philosophy of war. The Japanese never caught up. Colonel Sunio Endo of the 32nd Army Intelligence Section on Okinawa wrote one of the last Japanese assessments. American sniper superiority is not just a matter of weapons. It is a philosophy. They elevate marksmanship into an art, supported by endless resources, science, and engineering. Killing is for them a calculation, not an act of spirit. To the Japanese, this was more than defeat. It was the collapse of an entire way of war. Legends born in the Pacific. From Guadalcanal to Saipan to Okinawa, Marine snipers proved that a single man, with a steady hand and a clear scope, could alter the course of battle. Their legacy stretched far beyond World War II. Years later, in the jungles of Vietnam, men like Carlos Hathcock would perfect the same art with rifles nearly identical to those used on Saipan. But the foundation of Marine sniper supremacy was laid here, in the coral ridges and burning jungles of the Pacific, where unseen ghosts ruled the battlefield, and every Japanese soldier learned to fear a rifle shot that seemed to come from the sky itself. To the Japanese soldiers trapped on Saipan, the American sniper was no man at all. He was a phantom. Entire patrols performed Shinto purification rituals before stepping out, convinced they were fighting something supernatural. Bullets arrived before sound. Bodies collapsed before men even registered the shot. To the Japanese mind, this was not technology, it was sorcery. Lieutenant Yoshio Suzuki of the 9th Tank Regiment later confessed, "It was as if the Americans had broken the natural laws of war. We no longer understood what battle meant. Machines of perfection." The truth was far from mystical, it was science. Each Marine sniper carried an M1903A1 Springfield rifle, a weapon the Japanese could not hope to match. Every barrel hand-selected, tested, and rejected if it failed to group within strict tolerances. Walnut stocks chosen for their resistance to warping in the tropics. Actions polished by skilled armorers until they cycled like silk. Triggers tuned to break clean, with no creep, no hesitation. And at the heart of it all, the Unertl 8X scope with crystal-clear glass and precision adjustments. Together, rifle and optic became a system capable of first-round kills at ranges the Japanese still swore were impossible, even as they buried officer after officer felled by those impossible shots. Death without mercy. Private First Class Hiroshi Nakamura of the 44th Independent Mixed Brigade described it best in his final letter home. "Death comes from the sky, like divine judgment. The brave and the coward fall alike. We are no longer men. We are only targets in a telescope." He spoke of the sound, an unnerving, sharp crack unlike normal rifles. The bullet struck first, the sound following after, creating the illusion that death itself traveled faster than thunder. Few Japanese soldiers ever learned the truth. The .30-06 Springfield round really did outrun its own sound at long range. Eyes that never blinked. But snipers were more than killers. They were spies with rifles. Through their scopes, they mapped entire battlefields, identifying leaders not by rank insignia, but by subtle gestures of command, tracking supply runs, trench systems, and hidden strongpoints invisible to the naked eye, reporting intelligence that shaped battalion and regimental strategy. Japanese doctrine saw snipers as assassins. The Marines saw them as hunter-scouts, the eyes and hand of the regiment. The patrol that never returned. Corporal Yukio Tanaka of the Naval Guard Force on Tinian left one of the most haunting accounts. His 8-man patrol advanced through a cane field in daylight. Within minutes, 5 men were dead, each killed with a single shot to the head or chest. The survivors crawled back for hours, bellies shredded by razor-sharp leaves, too terrified to stand. And the worst part? The American sniper had deliberately spared them. Tanaka wrote with bitterness that survival felt like mockery, proof that their lives or deaths lay entirely in the sniper's control. The morale of his entire unit shattered that day. A war Japan couldn't fight. Even Japanese counter-sniper programs collapsed. Lieutenant Colonel Hideyoshi Obata on Guam trained marksmen, set traps, even used dummy officers as bait. After 3 weeks, the score was humiliating. Not one Marine sniper confirmed dead, but 12 Japanese counter-snipers lost. Obata's final report admitted the unthinkable. American snipers could not be countered. Losses were to be accepted as inevitable. And the reasons went deeper than weapons. Marines were chosen from proven sharpshooters, then drilled in wind reading, ballistics, anatomy, and camouflage. They studied the effect of barometric pressure and humidity on bullet flight. They learned to wait motionless for days for the perfect shot. The Japanese called this approach soulless, too technical, too mechanical, lacking the warrior spirit. But on the battlefield, it was devastating. The jungle that killed leaders. By Guadalcanal, Japanese officers no longer led from the front. Company commanders disguised themselves as ordinary soldiers. Battalion leaders stayed in bunkers. Yet still the attrition continued, methodical and relentless. It felt as if the Americans held a list of names, working through officers one by one. And in truth, they did. Marine Scout snipers were handed detailed target rosters built from aerial recon, prisoner interrogations, and frontline reports. They were not just killing the enemy. They were decapitating the Japanese army's will to fight. The collapse of a code. For a military culture built on visible courage, this was unbearable. Officers who were supposed to lead by fearless example now cowered in trenches. Men expected to show contempt for death could no longer raise their heads in daylight. The sniper's bullet was more than a weapon. It was the collapse of Bushido itself that, in the vast jungles and islands of the Pacific War, the Japanese army faced an enemy they could not see, could not predict, and could never truly understand. Death seemed to walk on two legs, invisible and unstoppable. Soldiers whispered in hushed tones that the Americans had unleashed spirits of the underworld. Ghostly warriors who struck without warning, killing leaders with single, perfect shots, then melting back into the shadows as if the jungle itself had swallowed them. But these were no ghosts. They were United States Marine Corps snipers. Cold, patient, and armed with rifles so precise that they transformed entire battlefields into hunting grounds. To the terrified Japanese soldier, it felt like witchcraft. To history, it was science, precision engineering, relentless training, and the merciless patience of men who had turned killing into a mathematical art. Japanese patrols, once fearless, began performing Shinto purification rituals before stepping into the jungle. These were not ceremonies for victory. They were prayers for survival. Lieutenant Yoshio Suzuki of the 9th Tank Regiment later admitted that sniper fire had shattered the very foundation of Japanese military logic. It broke the warrior code. Courage, discipline, and obedience meant nothing against an unseen rifleman. How could you fight what you cannot see? How do you defend yourself against a bullet that arrived before you even heard the shot? The weapons themselves were terrifyingly perfect. The Marine Corps snipers carried the M1903A1 Springfield rifle, a masterpiece of American engineering. Each barrel was hand-tested, each stock selected from seasoned walnut, resistant to rot in the tropics. Triggers were tuned by expert armorers until they broke clean and sharp, with no drag, no hesitation. These were not just rifles. They were instruments of precision death. And mounted atop them, the Unertl scope, a slim, gleaming tube of glass and steel that gave Marines the eyes of a hawk. Through it, they could see farther, clearer, and deadlier than any Japanese soldier had ever imagined possible. For hours, even days, snipers would lie still, watching, studying. They learned who gave orders, who carried the maps, who moved first when commands were given. They memorized faces and habits, waiting for the moment when one squeeze of the trigger could collapse an entire chain of command. Private Hiroshi Nakamura of the 44th Independent Brigade described this terror in his final letter home. Death comes from a sky like divine judgment. It makes no distinction between the brave and the cowardly. We are nothing but insects in the glass of a telescope. And for the Japanese, the sound of the sniper's shot was unlike anything else. A sharp, unnatural crack, always arriving after men had already fallen. The living could not understand how a soldier collapsed before the sound of the rifle reached them. In truth, the high-velocity .30-06 rounds moved faster than sound itself. It created the illusion of silent death, followed only by a distant echo of thunder rolling across the battlefield. That eerie sequence, death first, sound second, convinced many Japanese soldiers that they were fighting something beyond human. One patrol reported losing 5 men to a single hidden sniper in broad daylight. Every shot struck the chest or head. No wounded, no cries, just instant death. And then, the survivors realized the sniper had allowed 3 men to crawl back alive. It was not mercy. It was a message. I decide who lives and who dies. That psychological blow was more destructive than artillery. Marine sniping was never about courage. It was about patience and science. Marines studied wind, temperature, barometric pressure, even the rise and fall of the sun. They knew anatomy so well that they could place a bullet in a man's body with surgical precision, ensuring death before he even hit the ground. They could wait motionless for days, mosquitoes biting, rain soaking, hunger gnawing, just for a single perfect shot. To the Japanese, who still believed spirit and intuition could overcome technology, this methodical, merciless science was alien. And on the battlefield, it was devastating. Entire Japanese units began refusing daylight patrols. Officers stripped off insignia, terrified of being singled out. Commanders issued orders at night from the safety of bunkers, afraid to show their faces in the light of day. The Bushido code demanded courage and visibility. Marine snipers turned that courage into a death sentence. Major Misoyama of the 2nd Division confessed in his reports that more officers died to sniper fire at Guadalcanal than to artillery, mortars, or even disease. His words painted a picture of jungles transformed into killing fields, where every shadow hid a hunter and every movement might be your last. No distance, he wrote, is far enough to ensure survival. That was the brilliance of Marine snipers. They did not simply kill men. They dismantled the spirit of the Imperial Japanese Army. Every officer dropped by a single bullet was a blow against morale. Every patrol, too terrified to move in daylight, was a victory before the battle even began. Snipers waged psychological warfare with every trigger pull. And as Japanese soldiers huddled in their foxholes, one chilling truth echoed through their ranks, carried by rumor, fear, and experience alike. You are not fighting men. You're being hunted.